We are live. This is Emil Fisher with another episode of the BCTL podcast. I'm here baking some cookies with my buddy Josh Palmer. How's it going, Josh?
I'm good, Emil. How are you, man?
I'm good. I'm as good as can be, as all things considered. I can't complain too loudly, and even if I did, no one would care. So for anyone who doesn't know, Josh is a BJJ black belt. Are you under Steve Bongiorno, or I'm not sure how to pronounce the guy's last name, but
yeah, Steve Bongiorno at South Jersey BJJ. It's he's a fourth dan under Ricardo Almeida, and that's who we're affiliated with overall is Ricardo Almeida Association.
Okay, yeah, and so Josh's main claim to fame has only a little bit to do with his jiu-jitsu. It's his status as an announcer. You're probably one of the most prolific announcers in the sport. What organizations have you announced for?
So, I mean, over the years, a lot when you consider the amount of kind of small, domestic promotions and stuff that pop up, last a little bit and then disappear. But in terms of the ones that have a bit more notoriety and a bit more staying power, the one I've been working for the longest is Cage Warriors Fighting Championship. You can check out pretty much all of their shows back to about Cage Warriors 40, Cage Warriors 45 on UFC Fight Pass. We're now at 100 and something. So I think it's about 9 years I've been working for them now. Obviously they got a bit more notoriety because you got guys like Dan Hardy, Michael Bisping, Conor McGregor. They all came through the Cage Warriors roster. So I was lucky enough to commentate Conor's last 4 or 5 fights before he got in the UFC. And that's how a lot of people got more exposure to Cage Warriors as a promotion. But, at this point, they've sent somewhere around 94, 96 guys to the UFC. So they're very much, they fulfill that feeder role at that level just below the UFC. And then from a jiu-jitsu perspective, obviously Polaris and Kasai are the two shows still going strong at the moment. Polaris has been going a good kind of 3+ years now. Kasai a little bit newer, but 5 or 6 shows in deep, and they're the two that have been able to put on the biggest matches over the last few years that I've had the pleasure of being able to call.
That's awesome. Are there any other smaller organizations in jiu-jitsu that you've announced for?
Yeah, I mean, there's several, but they only ever last 1 or 2 shows, or they don't. They just don't stick around or have staying power. I mean, as you well know, it's not a particularly profitable business on a lot of models. A lot of guys get into it for the love of doing it and find that it's unsustainable. But there were some shows back in the day, like Sub 15 and various other incarnations of that in the UK. I think I was just lucky that I kind of hit a stride with doing this kind of stuff when a couple of the bigger shows came to fruition. I've called the odd match on Fight to Win, but that's really more that I happen to be at the venue either competing or there as a referee or there to help out. And, Jay Regabuto was doing commentary and he needed a corner. So he just grabbed me and come on in. But outside of that, the real big bucket list one for me that I was able to knock off last year was ADCC's.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, man, I went to ADCC 2009 in Barcelona. That was the first one I ever went to in person. And then again, 2 years later, ADCC 2011, I went to. And that was just when I was starting to do a bit more commentary. And I remember thinking, one time I'd love to do that. And I was just really lucky that AJ Agazam introduced me to Mo Jassim, and Mo is was very complimentary and wanted to give me a chance at joining the broadcast team for ADCC, and that was a bucket list thing. So I was really happy with that.
That's awesome, man. So how did you get into announcing? I know you're an architect, am I correct?
That's what I still do as my day job. Yep.
Yeah. So how does, say Emil Fisher wanted to become the next Josh Palmer? How would one go about doing such a thing?
I mean, it kind of just, the thing is, there's a lot of luck. Like, you can't lie. There's just an absurd amount of luck. There's being right place, right time. Now, there is obviously a skill set that comes with the kind of thing that I do, or what I think there should be a skill set to be able to portray the shows the way that I choose to do it. But in terms of getting your foot in the door, man, it was just networking and like right place, right time. you know, the first show that I ever started commentating for was a little show called UWC. I think it was UWC 11, which was like a domestic MMA show on the east of the UK, and I was in the crowd, man. And you know, the guy who was commentating was an MMA fighter called Pierre Guillet, and he didn't have anyone to commentate with. And he came over to talk to one of my friends because we were sort of part of the same fight team. And I said, "Oh, I'm really looking forward to seeing the co-main event because there's this one particular jiu-jitsu guy in it." And he realized that, hang on a minute, I knew a little bit about what I was talking about. And he came back and said, "Okay, you're going to commentate this event with me." And that was it, man. And I did that. And then the next one, I messaged the promoter and I said, "Hey, I really enjoyed it. Can I come and do it again for free?" And, you know, who's going to turn that down? So he said yes. And, you know, then 3 or 4 shows later, he threw me, you know, $50-$60 for gas, and just kind of went from there and built up and built up. And, you know, I happened to have been in the right place, right time for a couple of opportunities. And then a couple I went after myself and they happened to pay off. So from that perspective, it's kind of just networking and grinding. You know, before I got into commentary, I would referee a lot of jiu-jitsu. So I travel all around the UK at the weekends refereeing competitions. And then I got into doing a lot of MMA judging as well, which is one of the bonus aspects, I think, of my commentary in mixed martial arts. Is I'm one of the guys who will openly judge a fight on the microphone, because I judged like 700 or 800 fights before I got into commentating. But that, again, you know, the UK, there's no commission, there's no barrier to entry. I literally went to an open mat where there happened to be a fight promoter, and he heard me talking about mixed martial arts and like, "Oh, you sound like you might know what's going on with the rules. Do you want to judge?" And I ran his judging panel for like the next 10, 12 events from that point on. That's literally how lucky I was to get into it at the start. So there's a few more barriers to entry nowadays, but a lot of it's just networking and you know, meeting the right people at the right time.
It's funny because it's kind of a similar experience for me as a writer. You know, just it's just reaching out to the right people at the right time, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So as a commentator, apart from obviously ADCC, I'm sure was fucking insane.
Whew, dude, nuts.
What has been your favorite promotion other than ADCC to commentate for?
They are all good in their own right because they are all very slightly different. I'm quite fortunate in that the 3 that I commentate for primarily now are all their own kind of slight niche. You know, Kasai, for instance, has pretty decent production value. You know, the production crew in there for the venues and stuff always find these amazing spaces, and they have the tournament format, which is kind of a unique thing in itself. And from a commentary perspective, presents a lot of multiple threads to keep track of. You know, all the variations and permutations that can happen with tiebreakers, and we got 1 round left. What happens if this guy beats this guy, and all that sort of thing. So there, you know, that is a really interesting thing to deal with from there. And then you go to Polaris, and you know, that's a different ball game again, because they care about super evenly matched fights that are a high level. But I have an extra bit of workload with that, in that I have a lot of extra interviewing stuff to do with that broadcast, and it's a 3-man booth. So again, that's a little bit different. And then Cage Warriors, you know, that's MMA, which is totally different entirely. And my role for them has morphed over the years. You know, I used to have to do the full Joe Rogan stand up at the piece to camera at the start, and then they changed their process a little bit when they got involved with BT Sport before they were on UFC Fight Pass, and brought in an extra presenter. And for them, I now just do color commentary, which, if I'm really lucky and there's a lot of jiu-jitsu, means I get to, you know, talk about jiu-jitsu in a fight context, which is just different again from doing pure grappling, you know. And it's a nice break, you know, because it does change the dynamic, as I'm sure you appreciate, substantially.
Yeah, for sure. Do you find that there has been any evolution in the meta game of jiu-jitsu in MMA over the last, you know, say, since you started doing announcement for MMA?
Yeah, I mean, it has changed a little bit, but for the most part, you just see guys integrating wrestling better. That's pretty much it, blending wrestling and jiu-jitsu together. It's still really quite hard to make a lot of jiu-jitsu work in MMA, because guys don't pull the trigger on stuff as quickly as they need to. What I feel with jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts is there's a sense of urgency that really has to be there. Like, you know, you can't control somebody for the length of time you need to slyly set something up. I mean, you can if the skill level is vast and they don't know what they're doing. But if it's any kind of evenly matched fight, you know, the more explosive, they're sweatier. There's got to be a sense of urgency, and that's mainly how the dynamic changes. Every so often, you see people come through who have this kind of different style, and it's just they'll go for stuff, and that's an absolute pleasure to commentate. But for the most part, you see people appreciating that you don't really have these long periods of control anymore. It's much more scrambly, much more wrestly, and you know, you've really got to try and be more complete.
Great. Now, as far as the different rule sets that you have commentated for, do you have any one rule set that you think is going to dominate over the next, you know, period of time, the next 5 years, 6 years, whatever?
It depends on the perspective, doesn't it? I think. I mean, you know, from an entertainment perspective,
yeah,
Fight to Win's rule set's pretty gnarly, man. I mean, you know, that really, you get some good results on that for match entertainment. In terms of the shows that I do, you know, again, they're horses for courses. I don't think one is going to push out the other in any regard because they are that different. And I'm not really someone who gets too hung up on rule sets. They're just different. They're just different. There's pluses and minuses to both of them. I think the issue comes where whenever you have evenly matched fights, a lot of the time they might not be that exciting, or they might be less exciting from a fan perspective. I think that's just an unfortunate side effect of the sport. You know, when people used to compare, oh well, EBI is better because EBI has more subs. Well, it does when you put a purple belt against the black belt. You know, that tends to happen. You know, Polaris are never going to make a match where that happens. They're just not going to do it. So you tend to have a different pacing to matches. Their rule set's interesting. The breaking it down into periods, and you have to win all the periods. You know, that has merit. The biggest issue with any rule set is how do you adequately penalize guys without taking money away from them? That you know, literally, I don't know what other motivator you can come up with. So, you know, submission orientated stuff, I think is a pretty good one right now. I mean, like I say, I like them all for different reasons. They bring different entertainment value in different ways.
Yeah, for sure.
It's my diplomatic answer.
Yeah, no, I mean that's an answer. It's I think that because you have the unique perspective of actually having sat mat side or cage side for so many different types of events, your perspective is going to be a bit more developed than the casual viewer. Do you think that there's a benefit to having mismatches on the card? I know that one promotion that proudly put mismatches on their card was a promotion in Canada called Submission Series Pro.
Yeah.
What they would do is they would deliberately put mismatches on there because they wanted more finishes. Do you think that there is some merit to that?
Yep, I absolutely do. You know, as long as you're open about the possibilities that are happening, you know, people can moan about purity and stuff all they want, but there's a reason we like some of those freak show matches from the Pride days. There's a reason why Quintet has some wicked events, right? Because the little guy can still catch the big guy, but it's nice to see the mismatch occasionally, you know. So yeah, I'm not going to lie. I don't mind mismatches as much as some people. I really don't. But you know, I don't. People need to be honest about the fact that, okay, well, it's a mismatch, so you are either going to have a cool upset or you're going to have a higher likelihood of submission. To try and bill it as this is an A-level card and everybody on it is super, you know, is super high level and it's evenly matched when you know it's not, is a different ball game. So I would rather people weren't disingenuous and, you know, hey, as long as you're upfront about it, I am good with mismatches.
Okay, cool. One thing that I've actually heard a lot of people complain about is the number of rule sets that exist in jiu-jitsu.
Sure.
They feel like it's a barrier to better professionalizing the sport. From your perspective, having commentated on probably, you know, a myriad of different types of rule sets, Do you think that there should be like one unified rule set, or do you see a benefit to there being many rule sets?
Well, let me ask you this, which is, before I answer that, what's your favorite rule set? Because you've competed under, God knows how many at this point.
I enjoy, and I've actually never competed under the rule set, but I really enjoy the ADCC rule set.
Okay.
I really like the EBI rule set. I just like it. Like, I like the idea of, penalizing both competitors for sucking in that 10-minute period by putting them in a chip position. I appreciate that, and I think that there's an interesting amount of gamesmanship in that rule set.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just like grappling. I just like grappling, and for me, competition's an end to a means.
Yeah. So I competed in this tournament back in 2009 or 10 back in the UK. That was a tournament bracket, right? I can't remember single or double elimination, but it was 15-minute time periods, and if there was no submission in 15 minutes, you both got DQ'd. So I remember the guy who won the bracket that I was in, the weight bracket before we did the absolute, the guy who won the weight bracket was the only person in the whole bracket to sub anyone. She had a bracket of like 16 people. He was the only match, with a submission, so he won outright, and that was the tournament. Which was interesting. But yeah, but do I think there are value to multiple rule sets or singular rule sets? I do think there's value to multiple rule sets. I think it's all broadly similar. It's just hard whether people start comparing. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the more entertaining ones and the ones that people enjoy the most will win out. But I'm happy that there are multiple outlets. I don't particularly enjoy. If I was going to compete now again, I mean, it's been a year, just over a year since I last competed. But if I was going to compete again, I probably wouldn't do a points match. That's not what thrills me anymore. So I'm happy that there are sub-only options for me then to go and do. I think having something like Grappling Industries that has the round robin format is fantastic as well, because you're getting serious value for money with your mat time rather than straight knockouts. I think they all have different merits, and I'm perfectly happy that there's several variants of them. I think ultimately from a economic perspective, the best ones will win out. But I'm happy for people to have multiple outlets. It only really gets dicey when people start going, well, this person is the best ever because they can do A but not B, or they can do everything, or do you know what I mean? That it makes those comparisons fuzzier, but at the end of the day, they're just kind of, you're having those discussions for shits and giggles more than anything else, aren't you?
Yeah. So again, kind of from your unique perspective, having seen probably more matches than anyone I've had on this podcast, just because of the nature of your job. Gi versus no gi in a professional grappling setting.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Different sport, man. Different sport. I'll be quite honest. I don't enjoy watching high-end gi grappling as much as I enjoy watching high-end no gi grappling. Generally speaking. The caveat with that is that I've never been a person who actually watches a lot of gi jiu-jitsu anyway. Certainly not since purple belt, particularly. I don't watch that much no gi. I mean, I really don't consume that much jiu-jitsu on a daily basis as a spectator. I obviously do when I'm doing research for shows, which is something we can talk about later. And obviously I do for big events. But, I'm not some super fan who watches gi jiu-jitsu all the time. I'm just not. Anytime I spend time around, the guys from Flow Grappling or like Ricardo or Howell or any of those guys, it's abundantly clear that, there's a hell of a lot going on in gi jiu-jitsu that, I don't stay up on as much. I just don't. So from an entertainment perspective, for me personally, I watch more no gi than gi.
Okay, that's fair. Do you think that there, as far as in jiu-jitsu and competitive jiu-jitsu, do you think that there's an upcoming meta or trend that we're going to be seeing over the next couple of years?
In jiu-jitsu as a whole?
In competitive grappling.
Competitive grappling. Ooh, that's a good question. I honestly don't know at the moment. I mean, you know, we're coming off the back of the leg lock trend, and everybody's now able to defend those more. So maybe we're going to see something else come through. But I honestly, for the life of me, couldn't tell you what it is. I really couldn't, and I don't profess to be as good enough of a trend analyst to know that. You know, I mean, certainly there's some stuff. You know, the thing with jiu-jitsu, man, it's that rabbit hole, isn't it? It's so endless. And there are definitely certain aspects where I find myself in commentary leaning on color guides who I know are way better at some of this technical analysis than I am. You know, when I do Kasai and it's Sean Williams, I'm not going to sit there and try and break down some of the lapel stuff that's going on for you, because he's got it dialed in. And man, I learned stuff during each of those. You know, same with Polaris. I lean on Tom Barlow for that stuff. You know, the guy won a couple of Masters World Champs. He teaches gi stuff every single day. He knows more about it than I do. So I got to be honest. Half the time I lean on some other guys as much as I can, because I'm just not as up on it as I could be. It's my honest answer, man. It's, you know, it's hard to stay on top of this stuff all the time. You know, if it's what I did permanently for a living, it would probably be easier, but you know, it's not. So it still kind of pushes slightly into the hobbyist category for me.
Gotcha. So I guess here's another question. Do you find that there are particular competitors that you think are going to be the next big thing in the sport? Are there any competitors that you've seen kind of on the undercard of Kasai or something like that stuck out to you?
I mean, we see quite a few guys come through who you think are going to be really, really good. I mean, I'm trying to think of people that come off the top of my head, but it's one of those things where you put me on the spot, it's going to be tougher. Yeah, but like, you know, when, you know, some of the first matches when like Ethan Krallinston was starting to come through and Ash Williams is starting to have real good success. You know, I've got to support some British grapplers out there. I know he's Welsh, but you know, he's starting to take out those bigger guys now. Man, the first time, do you know what? The last Kasai show, I was super impressed with John Coombs. Like I had not actually seen him grapple before, certainly not live. And I was really impressed with that. There's definitely guys who come through and you think, oh, this kid could be mustard, but you know,
yeah, John's actually going to be on the podcast on Wednesday.
Oh, see, look at that segue plug for you. But yeah, there's certain guys who you're just like, okay, and at the moment that he's doing really well, but you know, you'll see it's tough, because the weirdest thing about commentating long shows like that, and I feel bad about it a lot of the time, is that guys will come up to me and say, what did you think of my match? And I have to sit there and go, I don't remember what happened. Because until I go and watch it back, there's a really good chance I don't remember what happened, unless it was something crazy. You know, Tarek Hopstock is a good example. You know, that kid's good. And he pulled off Tariqa Plata. It's like, well, I'm not going to forget that, you know, as easily as I'm going to forget somebody who did, you know, something else that was good. Actually, now that I think about it, honestly, some of my favorite gi matches that I've got to commentate recently, Tommy Lanica, that guy's not in a dull fight. You match him up right on a big show, he's gonna be on fire. But yeah, generally speaking, sorry, back to the point, is I don't remember matches as easily until I go back and watch them afterwards, because there are so many things going on in my headset and my peripheral and stuff during a match that, you know, I have to go back and rewatch a lot of stuff to remember what happened.
Okay. We were talking a little bit earlier about the professionalization of jiu-jitsu, making it a bit bigger of a spectator sport. What do you think needs to happen for competitors to be able to make more money doing what they do in the sport? Well, from your perspective as somebody who is a professional spectator.
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer is you get more money with more eyeballs. It is literally that simple. Until there's advertising revenue that is legitimate, or more legitimate, should I say, because plenty of people have got some pretty nice little sponsorships knocking around. But until there's more advertising revenue and or reasonable TV money, people aren't going to get paid more, and you need more eyeballs. Now, here's the catch-22. I am not somebody who sits there and like, I don't know jiu-jitsu is ever going to hit that point, from a spectator sport. How many guys do you know who train jiu-jitsu who don't even watch jiu-jitsu? It's a lot. It is a lot. Okay. And to sit here and say, oh yeah, we're going to make this, what is ultimately a very complex niche sport, into something for the wider viewership, it's tough, man. It's tough. I've always said people understand a punch. It's a bit more visceral. They don't understand a slight little hip switch to shift your weight in side control. It's just not as primal and easy to understand as lumping somebody in the face. So I'm not convinced that jiu-jitsu is ever actually going to hit that point. I'm also not convinced that we necessarily want it to. I always think back to how rule sets get changed when stuff becomes an Olympic sport to try and make it more spectator friendly. And ultimately, you then have to really start having the bigger conversations about efficacy versus, or purity versus sport version and that kind of thing, which I know we have anyway. But man, it's another whole ball game when wider spectator base comes in. And I'm not convinced that jiu-jitsu is easy enough to understand that we're going to be able to hit that point. I hope we do. Of course, I hope we do. But I'm not as easily convinced as some people.
I mean, golf is a spectator sport that a lot of people watch.
This is true.
I'm just saying, if people watch golf, why don't people watch jiu-jitsu?
How many people play golf versus how many people practice jiu-jitsu? I guarantee a lot more people play golf. I also know that it's very easy to understand. Ball goes from A to B in as few shots as possible.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like I say, people have different opinions. I'm one of those odd people who, I'm within the realm of all the people who are doing their best to try and make it a broader, appealing spectator sport. But I just don't know if that's going to happen. I have my reservations. I wish I didn't, and I wish I could say, yeah, well, we just need to do ABC, and your average person's going to watch. But I know people who've gone to events to support direct, immediate family, and even having that connection to it, they don't A, have the slightest clue what's on, or B, have any interest in anything outside of the one match they went to see. And that's people who have a connection, let alone your average viewer flicking TV channels. So I don't know. I hope we get there one day, but I'm not convinced it's going to be that easy or fast.
Gotcha. Are there any dream matchups that you want to see on one of the shows that you commentate? Like, if you could commentate on any matchup or any matchups, plural, what would they be? So,
like, I'm becoming quite a big fan of MMA guys versus jiu-jitsu guys. I like it. We got to have a couple of matchups that I really wanted to see at ADCC, so I was very happy about that. And I haven't really had a chance to recalibrate some of the stuff yet. But like the guy I have always like, my bucket list commentary item is to commentate a Ryan Hall match, and it's not going to happen. He's not going to come back to competitive grappling. But man, Ryan Hall versus someone like Haffer, or Ryan Hall versus anybody, quite frankly, I would love to commentate. Gary Tonin versus Renato Canuto was the one I wanted to see the most, and we got it at ADCC, and I got to commentate it. And unsurprisingly, it was sort of one of the match of the year candidates. So super chuffed about that. But yeah, Ryan Hall versus anybody, quite frankly, is the top of my list.
Yeah, I guess I wonder, from having watched, like, I've watched a bunch of Ryan Hall's matches, and I wonder how he would do against some of the modern guys. I wonder how, like, Ryan Hall would fare against an Eddie Cummings, or against a Gary Tonin, or against a Gio Martinez.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, any of them. That's what I want to know. Which, it's weird for someone not to say, okay, well, guy A is really good at the moment and guy B is really good at the moment. Clearly, that's a match I want to see. I want to see a guy who hasn't competed in jiu-jitsu for like 6 years, which is weird, but that's that's my best answer.
We saw that with Hajar versus Buchecha.
Yeah, and that was pretty apparent that Hodger was able to but you can see there's a shift, and it's just different when guys haven't been in fight camp for that long. At one point, I was supposed to be possibly commentating. Who was it going to be? It was a Demian Maia match coming back into jiu-jitsu, but I can't remember who he was supposed to be fighting. And that got me super pumped, right? For like an old school guy like that to make a transition back to grappling. So, there's a few guys I would like to see like that in matches. I don't have that many guys right now who are like pure sport jiu-jitsu guys where I'm like, yeah, I really want to see them against other jiu-jitsu guys. They're just not on my radar.
Gotcha. Now, is there any organization that is putting out events that you would want to commentate for that you have not worked with yet?
I mean, the weird thing is there aren't that many around. I mean, you think of the ones that have like the bigger exposure that I don't really commentate are like Third Coast, SUG, some of the big IBJJF stuff. I mean, I've never done like IBJJF Worlds or stuff. I got asked to, but didn't pan out. And I've never actually done like a full fight to win. But outside of that, there aren't that many shows that have they're not on UFC Fight Pass or that kind of thing. So, sure, I'd like to have a shot at doing all of them for various different reasons. But there's none where I sit there and I go, yeah, I want to do that right now. Part of it is that the other shows keep me busy enough, as a second gig to a day job, flying internationally 20 plus times a year is enough. That's a lot of time away from family, and it gives me my jiu-jitsu feel. Obviously, it's not going to be 20 times this year. I'll be lucky if it's like 4. But yeah, exactly. But generally speaking, Cage Warriors originally were planning on banging out 15 shows this year. Kasai 4, Polaris 4. How much more time have I really got? I like the other shows that are going on. Don't get me wrong. I would watch them. I'd actually really like to do a quintet. That's one I forgot to mention. I would like to do a quintet. I think that performance style is interesting. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to other people who commentate any of these other events. That's not what I'm trying to do. But obviously, I enjoy watching those events, and I think I would do a good job if given the chance. But, there's nothing I'm actively going out there and saying, hey, yeah, let me do this. I've got enough stuff going on, and I'm happy with what I've been fortunate enough to do so far.
Gotcha. Now, earlier you were talking about, a lot of these shows are one and done, where they put on one event and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Are there any, I guess, hallmark or telltale signs that a show is going to fail that you see? Are there any mistakes that you can see from your vantage point as a commentator?
I mean, it depends on what their model is, right? I mean, most of these shows when they start up are going to be getting money from ticket sales. To sell ticket sales, you need local guys first and foremost. Even the bigger, the really big names, nobody's really going to an event to see them. They're not. They're going to watch it at home if they want to see them. They're going to go if they've got a mate or a training partner on. It's one of the reasons I think Fight to Win's been so freaking successful at what they do, because, they pack that place with local guys and then they're able to bring in the big guys because of that. I think a smaller show who tries to overreach straight off the bat and it's like, oh, we booked this name. Well, that name is not going to sell you tickets. It's not. I don't care if you think it will, it won't. And that's where I've seen people get unstuck. It is, I think, overspending in that regard. But look, hey, it's easy for me to armchair quarterback. Yeah, I've not promoted an event. I've promoted grappling tournaments. I did 5 of those back in the UK. But an actual event that ticket sales like that, that's not my area of expertise. So hey, take everything I say with a grain of salt. But I think overextending and not appreciating where your real sales are coming from is number one. And again, I think it's the old thing: don't run before you can walk. This is one of the reasons why flow grappling is so good for some events, right? Is some people get upset. I'm sure you've seen comments online where people get upset with some of the quality of streams and stuff that are on flow grappling. But flow started as it's a grassroots thing for smaller events who can't get coverage to have a company come in and just take care of the production and stream it, and they do everything. If you're on a bigger event on UFC Fight Pass or something, you've got to take care of all the production and the OB crew and everything yourself, and it's a massive expense. Trying to jump straight into doing all of that before you kind of have proof of concept and that kind of thing is probably a mistake that I imagine people make. But as I say, that's just what I sort of see. Luckily, I've been able to sort of help the events that I work for. One of the things I do whenever I commentate is I do a feedback document after the show, right? So I send them my notes and I say, hey guys, this worked, this didn't work. From a spectator perspective, I thought this bit was boring as hell, and can we cut this out? Or, and then, okay, well, technically, here's the problems I had with talking to the crew and that kind of thing. Because, there's so many other things that go on. You don't just sit down with a microphone and talk and then walk and go away. The bigger events, there's so much more stuff going on. So it gets a bit involved. If anyone's ever tried to talk with someone else talking to you at the same time, that's where it starts getting really, really weird,
Yeah.
Because you've got people in your ear the whole time.
Yeah. Now, one thing you mentioned was flow grappling and their place in the sport. There's a lot of criticism of flow grappling and of some of the things that flow grappling does. What are some things that you think flow grappling should be doing better, and what are some things that you think flow grappling is doing well?
The biggest thing that made the difference for me in how I enjoyed flow content was when they shifted to putting entire unclipped events online. Because it actually wasn't that long ago. They didn't used to do that. They used to have everything chopped up into matches, and you can't watch an event like that. You can't do it. So I literally I'm not going to watch your event. I'm going to watch the one guy I want to see. But I quite I like having whole events, and that for me was the biggest shift in what they did, where I enjoyed it more. But I think people are too hard on them, man. I mean, people get upset with the fact that they paywall content, right? But at the end of the day, you get a lot for your money with them. I think if you enjoy jiu-jitsu, if you enjoy jiu-jitsu as a spectator sport, I think value for money, they're tough to beat. I don't know what they could be doing better because I don't know their internal workings and that kind of thing. From my perspective, as someone who pays for a flow grappling subscription and watches stuff, I think I would like to see more documentary content. Maybe they've been doing it lately, but I haven't been paying as attention lately. But I enjoy the behind the scenes stuff and the documentary stuff generally more than I do events. So I'm cool with if they keep pumping out content like that. But I think the online community gives them a little bit too much of a hard time. They're used to getting a lot of stuff for free, and I don't think Flow particularly overcharge or rip people off, quite frankly.
Okay. Do you think that there are any things that events can be doing to attract a wider audience?
Yeah, so this comes back to this whole thing of like, are we ever going to be a spectator sport outside? Yeah. And I think you've got to have a bar there, and I think you've got to make it. You've got to try and make it a bit of a night out with, kind of billing it as the fights are almost secondary to having a night out. It's not necessarily a great answer, and it's certainly not a well thought out, formulated thought. But that's a tough one, man. I mean, that's the answer everyone's trying to crack, right? And I just don't know. again, my perspective is perhaps slightly warped because I'm never going to a jiu-jitsu event unless I'm working it. It's literally that simple at this point. Same with MMA. Like, I'm not going to an MMA event unless I'm working it. That might be because I've been around it for 13 years and, you know, I do all this stuff within it and my perspective is different. But, you know, I then sit there and think, well, if I'm not going to, who is, you know, or is my perspective warped because I'm too involved? Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I don't know if I'm the best qualified to answer that because I'm perhaps not in the demographic that consumes, you know, jiu-jitsu in that way, or that people would be targeting to consume jiu-jitsu in that way.
Okay. Having moved from the Great Britain to the United States.
Great Britain, yes.
England.
It's weird, you know. I either say I'm English or I'm a Brit. I very rarely say I'm from Great Britain. I say I'm from the UK most of the time.
I wasn't sure exactly where you were from. You know,
I mean, I'm from England, so you know the UK is fine, Great Britain's fine, England's fine. I don't get. There's definitely some like Welsh or Scottish people who get a little bit uppity if you refer to them as like a Brit or from the UK. Like, no, I'm Welsh, I'm Scottish. You know,
what are you gonna do? But you know, being from there and having moved to here.
Yep.
Were there any significant differences that you have noticed in the jiu-jitsu culture, both competitively and in the academy?
There's actually a lot more than people would think.
I bet.
Yeah. So, firstly, you guys pay a lot of money for jiu-jitsu. Like, jiu-jitsu is way more expensive here. Way more. The prices that most academies charge around here, you'd be out of business straight away in the UK. Like, nobody's paying that. Now, I'm not sure if that's people undervaluing themselves or where that comes from, but yeah, you guys pay a lot more. You tend to have, I think, a slightly bigger influence of traditional martial arts in the US. I feel like nobody really back home calls people professor all that much. I certainly hadn't really seen it before I came here. And obviously when I got my black belt here and people in the gym started calling me professor, it was a little bit weirder. But I feel like there's a greater degree of traditional martial arts in a lot of jiu-jitsu here. Again, though, I could be completely wrong because my experience within the US is limited to obviously a certain amount of places. But yeah, you guys also wrestle way harder, man. Like, wrestling is not a thing in the UK, and we don't have to generally worry about showing up to a class and, oh, there's a new student. By the way, he was a D1 wrestler. You know, like, I'm the guy. Like, you know, I'm the guy. Most people don't realize, but like, I trained with Nick Rodriguez for like his first 6-8 months of jiu-jitsu. Right? He showed up at our gym, and it was basically like, hey, I'm a former wrestler. We've been through like 7 schools previously and none of them were really good enough. Do you guys want to have a scrap? And we ended up being, you know, South Jersey ended up being his home for a while. And Jay Rugabuto, who's, you know, good friend of mine and the first black belt from our club outside of the professor, is still his coach from a competition perspective today. So yeah, we don't have to deal with those kind of crazy freak wrestlers randomly showing up at classes, and that obviously influences through the training to a certain extent in the UK. So that's definitely one difference. Is obviously wrestling is more prevalent for more people here. So I definitely feel like there's a bit more of a grinding influence in that regard in schools.
When you were in the UK, were you at one specific academy, or did you go to a couple of academies before kind of settling, or what was your kind of?
So jiu-jitsu, now it's different because there's loads of jiu-jitsu, but like back when I started, there really wasn't any. There was some obviously, but not a lot. You know, like I went and trained for a bit with the old Tsunami Gym fight team, which is like there a few UFC guys ended up from there. But that was like an hour drive to a broken down barn shed with holes in the roof in the middle of nowhere. You know, the gym that I first started training at, they're still going, and they're called Blue Wave Martial Arts. And, you know, they originally were, we would take mats and we would store them at a sports center, and we'd get them out 2 or 3 nights a week, rent 2 badminton courts, and put the mats out and then put them away at the end of the class. And that was how it was for years. It's when I ended up splitting off from there and going with Carson Gracie Norfolk, and same thing. For the longest time, that didn't have a permanent facility. Now both those gyms have permanent facilities, which kind of shows how stuff's growing. But you used to have to. You didn't. It's not like you could go to lots of different gyms and try them out. It's like, that's the gym for my area, so that's where I'm going. When I moved to the US, it's like where I am in South Jersey. There's maybe 6 or 7 gyms within like 7 or 8 miles. Or 10 miles, and you're kind of spoiled for choice. If I hadn't known people at this gym when I was first moving here, I might have ended up somewhere totally different. But it's only really in the last few years in the UK you have that ability to try several places within any given area and pick the best. Obviously, at that point, I'd been in my gym for a long time. I wasn't leaving it, so I feel it's very different for new guys starting now. And they're way more spoiled, I mean, it's a good thing. I don't mean that in any kind of derogatory way. I mean, like, jiu-jitsu's way bigger now. You can pick and choose who suits your style, your ethics, who's got a nicer facility, or you like their teaching manner, or their price point is what speaks to you, whatever it may be. You have those options now. 13 years ago, in somewhere like the UK, because you've got to remember they're on a bigger lag from the US fairly substantially. You just didn't have those options. It's like, right, that's the one club within like 50 miles. So that's where I'm going, and I've been very, very lucky that I've never had to travel more than maybe 15-20 minutes to train ever at my regular club. I don't know how some people do these slogs where they travel for like, we're in South Jersey. We're basically just south of Cherry Hill, and there's the shore is like a good hour and 10 away. If you go down the south of Jersey Shore, there's towards Cape May, it's like an hour and a half. And we've got guys who drive up a couple of times a week from there to train. And it's just like, I can't imagine having to do a 2 or 3 hour round trip to train. It's just something I've been fortunate enough to never had to do. And I honestly think that if I'd had to, it might have inhibited how into jiu-jitsu I got at the start.
Yeah. For sure. Are there any other major differences in the jiu-jitsu culture in the UK from here in the United States?
I don't really think, nothing that springs to mind. I mean, again, you got to remember, I haven't been, today is actually my 4-year anniversary of having moved to the US. It's literally 4 years today. So, I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 13 years. It's now a third of my pretty much a third of my jiu-jitsu life I've not been in the UK. So there could be some stuff going on now that I'm not up to date with. You never know. Sure. But certainly when I moved over here, availability of jiu-jitsu, class size, facility size is actually a good one now that I think about it. You guys have some gnarly facilities. I mean, where you train's massive, right? Strong style?
Yeah. Strong style is enormous.
Yeah, I mean, think our place here is we're over 6,500 square feet of mat space at South Jersey Jiu-Jitsu, which is just like, you can't fathom having a mat that size. I mean, our smallest mat is still, we have 3 mats, and our smallest one is still bigger than the entire gym that I used to train at in the UK. I went from being a brown belt there, and there were 2 black belts. I was a brown belt, and then everybody else was below that, to being like, okay, well, our gym, including me, now has like 10 black belts and like 30 brown belts, and there's 270 people, and it's just availability and density of jiu-jitsu is fantastic here. So I feel pretty spoiled now, quite honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I've been training for a bit longer than you, and I remember when I first got started, what was available versus what's available now, it's a huge difference.
Oh yeah.
It's ridiculously different.
I mean, how different do you think you would have been at jiu-jitsu if you had started now versus with what's available now versus back in the day, where we had to put a little bit, not trying to sound like high and mighty or anything, but we had to put a little bit more effort in to get to competitions, to get to gyms, to get to seminars, man.
I mean, the stuff we have available to us, having Fight to Win available as an option, as a venue, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
The fact that I get to compete at something like Fight to Win is just, it's bananas. Now, you own a brand, I believe you still own it, Valor Fightwear USA. How did you get linked up with Valor Fightwear? And then, how did you decide to bring a hub over to this country?
So that is pretty much, again, it's just one of those things through networking. Valor as a fightwear brand is fully owned and fully run by a guy in the UK. And that's all Europe and all of that. And they sponsored me for a bit before I moved here. And I kind of just said, hey, I noticed you don't really sell anything in the US. I'm moving to the US. Do you want a hand? And effectively, I'm a distributor for them here. Realistically, all the IP and everything is owned by them. But that's pretty much all that happened. Was I ended up saying, hey, do you fancy me flogging some gear for you? So obviously, it's in a little bit of a slow period right now with everything that's going on with COVID. As you can imagine, nobody's really clamoring for a new gi right now. But hey, it's just another, it's just another aspect of jiu-jitsu that's been interesting to be involved with. We'll ratchet stuff back up when the gyms start going back, but it's not, it's not a driving force for me in the stuff I do here. But it's, it's nice to be involved with and see that side of it. And ValorFightwearUSA.com if anyone wants some gear.
Yeah, I can vouch for the quality. I used to be sponsored by them, and then I moved on. But some of my favorite gis still come from Valor Fightwear USA.
I mean, it's tough, right? Because it's a very saturated market, isn't it? Really, gi stuff, and I kind of tell everybody, man, find all the gis are broadly similar in quality at certain price points. So just find the aesthetic that you like the most, and find a cut that works for you, and find an aesthetic that you like the most. If that's us, great. If that's another brand, great. At the end of the day, it's a cotton uniform, man. There's only so much innovation that can go into it,
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the Valor for fabric density for dollar is not bad at all. So that's just my 2 cents on that. Are there any projects or any things that you want to get involved in once things get back up and running?
So, I mean, from my perspective, one of the things I've started doing differently was I started teaching a community program. And just to get a bit more well-known outside of my gym in the immediate area, because, I've been teaching one class a week since I moved here, which is the least the least I've taught, sorry, since, so you wouldn't think I talk for a living, would you? Which, is the least I've taught in a very long time, because there wasn't that much jiu-jitsu around. I was teaching classes as a new blue belt, right? And that was after like a year of training, because there weren't black belts even around then in our area. But I've been able to get back to teaching complete beginner fundamentals classes again. For people in our area, in my local township, through the local rec center, so they provide the space, and they do all the marketing and the online payments for people. And they, all they ask is that I agree to a very affordable rate so that people can try it, and it's providing a bit more of a service to the community for people who don't want to make that full gym commitment, of $150, $170 a month, but, want to have a go and see what it's about. And honestly, going back to teaching complete fundamentals again has been really enjoyable, because it's been a long time since I've done it. And every single thing I show these guys is like mind-blowing, which has made me really reappreciate how awesome jiu-jitsu is. Because, I still learn stuff every now and then that gives me moments where I'm like, oh man, how did I not know that? So I'm not, from that perspective, that still happens, but to see it with like literally every single thing you show someone, and then to see them be able to do it week after week is great. Unfortunately, it was a 10-week. The first one was a 10-week program, and then a 2-week break, and another 10 weeks. And we got 8 weeks through the first 10-week program before COVID hit, and the township have obviously had to cancel every rec program, and they've now cancelled everything through to the end of, I want to say, like August, September. So I just made the relatively small investment in some mats for them, and started teaching this class and really enjoying it and that kind of thing. And that's had to go completely on hold. So I look forward to getting back to that and trying to build that up a little bit more, and just getting back to class, man. But it's been interesting because I don't miss jiu-jitsu as much as I thought I would. Which again is really odd to say for someone whose life is so invested in jiu-jitsu and has had such a transformation, physically and mentally through jiu-jitsu. But this is the most time off I've ever had. And, my shoulder's healing up. I've got a slap tear in my shoulder that I was about to go and have surgery on, and that's healed up quite well. And
do those heal?
No, it's probably not going to heal, and I'm probably going to re-tear it as soon as I get back on the mat. But I can certainly do this now, which I couldn't do, right before the COVID thing. But I'm stubborn as anything, so I train through injuries nonstop. I've had that thing a year before I went and got it MRI'd. So, it's the forced time off has been good. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back into jiu-jitsu in general, but I'm looking forward to getting back to teaching some fundamentals because it's given me a little bit of, reappreciation of the things I did love about jiu-jitsu.
For sure, man. Hopefully we're all back on the mats soon. So we are nearing the hour mark. I'm going to take a quick look at the questions, see if there's any questions on here that I've missed. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we did not touch on?
I mean, not particularly, man. I'm free to just spitball with whatever way you wanted to go, really. I mean, whenever I do these podcast things, it's always interesting whether people want to talk about commentary or, I'm one of those guys who, for people who don't know, I originally, like one of your previous guests, Seymour Yang.
Yeah.
Right. Who of course, is Mikatsu. I originally got a little bit of notoriety in the UK because he featured me on his blog, which was one of the few outlets for jiu-jitsu at the time on the internet. And, I'd lost like 140 pounds doing jiu-jitsu. I was 322 when I started. And yeah, exactly. Right. And I competed at 185. And I'd lost like 140 pounds and written this whole thing about it and got a tattoo that said jiu-jitsu saved my life on my back. And
it literally did.
Right. It really did. And a lot of the time, people want to talk about, they either want to talk about that or they want to talk about the commentary stuff and that kind of thing. So I'm always curious which way it's going to go. But man, I'm happy to chat about anything. It's I like to say, I am very much invested in jiu-jitsu. The only thing I haven't really done in jiu-jitsu and MMA is run an actual promotion. I've run grappling tournaments, I've competed, I've commentated, I've refereed, I've instructed. I haven't owned a gym and I haven't run a full-on ticket selling promotion. But so I've sold gis, right? So like pretty much every single thing you can do in jiu-jitsu, with the exception of own a gym and run a ticket selling promotion, I've had a dabble in at some point.
Do you have any aspirations to do any of the things you haven't done?
I feel like I used to say I'll never own a gym. But I feel like at some point I will. I've been enjoying teaching again. And I think there is a certain way I would go about doing it. It's a conversation for another time and it's a bigger thought that needs to be fleshed out. Yeah. But I have ideas of how I would do something different, because to me, I'm not interested in cultivating a sports jiu-jitsu team. I'm not interested in having high-end competitors. I'm not really interested in having an MMA team, that sort of thing. I'm interested in jiu-jitsu. For me, is the vehicle for personal development. End of. It's the best vehicle there is. So for me, a personal development hub where jiu-jitsu is the main mechanism is the kind of thing I would look to do. And at some point, I can see myself making it a reality. but it's certainly not on the radar in the next 12 months or so, especially not with what's just happened in the world and the economy now, man. I mean, I know a couple of people who just took the leap and well, they're newer into their business, and man, I feel for them right now. I really do.
Yeah, I can't imagine having started a business right before all this started, but hopefully we see the end of it soon.
Yeah, I can't imagine it's going on much longer. That's the most interesting thing for me, because I split my news media fairly consistently between the US and the UK, is just how differently the approach is, and how different culturally everyone is. It's really interesting, and it's a fascinating case study that I've been quite enjoying watching play out. Obviously, hardship for everybody aside, obviously,
yeah, of course.
but you know what I mean. It's
No, I don't actually.
It's just interesting to see how different countries are reacting. Like, people in the UK are more compliant. I won't say compliant, but like, they're generally agreeing with and appreciative of the lockdown and stuff that's going on. People here a little bit less so, but again, that's a cultural difference in America versus the UK, and the makeup and the way the states function and that kind of thing. So it's just been interesting for me from that perspective. But
I would imagine at least part of that is as a result of the socialized medicine that's available in the UK, and the fact that there is a more robust safety net available.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, look, not having money sucks wherever you are, but not having money and having to worry about, am I going to die because I can't see a doctor, just seems a little bit cruel and unusual to me. And I understand why we're at the place where we are with healthcare in the US, but I've got friends paying more in a month's premiums than I ever paid in 30 years of direct out of pocket. So for me, it's weird. That's the weirdest thing. I mean, whenever anyone says, "Oh, what's it like moving to the US?" I'm like, for the most part, the quality of life is freaking awesome. Like, the US is great. There's some stuff you guys have that I love, and I really enjoy living here. And it's not going to be much longer before I'm a US citizen as well. So I really like that, but I don't quite get my head around the healthcare side of it. That's the biggest adjustment for me generally. But hey, that's, again, that's off topic and a wider discussion for another time.
Of course. Yeah. Well, Josh, I was just checking, and I don't see any more questions here. So were there any shout outs, anything else you wanted to touch on before we cut this out?
Just generally speaking, thanks to Polaris Cage Warriors and Kasai for continuing to employ me and let me do this, because trust me, I'm very, very lucky that I get to travel to all these places and roll with all these different people at these events and commentate on these guys. And if anyone's ever in South Jersey, come check us out. South Jersey Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We're always game for a good scrap. So happy days. And obviously, thanks to you for having me on. It's always nice to chat to people who anyway, who are doing some cool content, and you've got a pretty gnarly guest lineup. So yeah, congrats on getting this going.
Well, thank you. No, I'm trying to build a guest list. The whole thing here, I've been doing this podcast now. I think this is the 18th episode. And the entire objective for me is, I see that I have this block of time that I'm normally spending training.
Yeah.
I just don't have the option of training the way I'd like to be training.
Sure.
And so what I'm doing is I'm using the spare time that this affords me to put something positive out into the world, because there's so much negativity right now. If you go on social media and you're scrolling through your social media, there's so much negativity. I'm trying to give people something a little bit different, a little bit more positive. So for anybody that's still tuned in, that's interested, tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern, I have Herman Lee coming on the podcast. He is the guitarist for a band called Dragon Force. Then Wednesday, I believe it was 6:30 p.m., might have been 7 p.m. Eastern, I have, we just talked about him, John Combs.
Oh, yeah.
Then Thursday, 5:30 p.m., I have Andy Rovat, who wrestled in the 2008 Olympics. He's coming on.
Nice.
Friday, I have Mr. Jiu-Jitsu. He is an internet personality and BJJ black belt and just a delightful human being. If you don't know who Mr. JJ is, you might want to look him up. Then Saturday, I have Joe Bays, the leg lock legend, coming on around noon. Sunday, I have Eric Paulson coming on.
Nice.
Around, I think we were talking about 2 p.m. I got to double check, but I'll be posting all those details. Building next week's schedule right now. I'm looking at some more interesting people.
So you're not busy at all, really?
No, not at all. Not at all.
No,
Here's the thing, man. I leave home in the morning. You know, I have it's my family's company, so I have a fairly flexible schedule.
Sure.
You know, leave home around 9:30, and I usually don't get home till sometimes 10 o'clock at night.
Right, because you go straight to the gym, or
exactly, and I'm at the gym 2-3 hours a day.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to compete at a decent level. So I've got this block of time that, you know, idle hands.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I know exactly. I know what it's like. I mean, hey, I didn't add it to the list, but I did have a podcast for 12 episodes several years ago called the Top Control Podcast, and I had guys like Frank Trigg on and Stuart Cooper on, and those kind of guys. So yeah, that was another thing I had to foray into. So I know how hard it is to try and build a schedule and do things when you are training and working and that kind of thing. So completely appreciate that. You're putting the time to good use while you got it.
I'm trying to take full advantage of the fact that a lot of these people are stuck at home like me.
Right, that's it. They can't go and train, so trying to coordinate schedules is actually a lot easier.
Exactly. So I'm going to do these daily until this all is over. And then once this is over, I'm still going to do the podcast, but I'll probably whittle it down to, twice a week, once a week, whatever.
Sure.
But as of right now, I got all this time. I'm going to give you guys this dope content. You can do with it whatever you want. Enjoy it. I don't really care. I'm doing it for myself too. I enjoy talking to people like you, Josh.
Sure. Oh, good. Well, I tell you what, if you want to have someone else from this neck of the woods on, Jay Regalbuto would be a good guest for you because he knows everybody in Northeast Jiu-Jitsu, and if there's a local event in this area, you can guarantee he's commentated it. I think he's done like 20 fight to wins now as well. So
he's commentated 2 things I was on.
There you go. So
this one that I was on, he butchered my fucking name like 2 different ways. It was the worst.
Yeah, but doesn't everybody butcher your name?
Yeah, fuck them. I mean, you got Seth Daniels. Welcome to the stage, Emil Fisher. We got Emil Fisher. It's like, come on. If you're going to mispronounce my name, choose one way and mispronounce it that one way.
To be fair, when I was on Fight to Win, I'm pretty certain that as soon as my match started, Seth yelled out into the crowd, "Hey, you fucking Brit."
It sounds like something Seth would do.
I think it was that. But yeah, anyway, Jay would be a good interview because you guys you can nerd out on local and up-and-coming competitors for sure.
Yeah, I definitely want to have him on. I know Josh LeDuc has been doing these podcasts as well as, I believe, Third Coast. Yeah. And I don't want to saturate the market with any one guest.
Yeah, sure.
So, like, for example, if I do have a guest on that somebody else has had on, I try to make sure I'm asking them a different set of questions. That's why I asked you if you've been on any other podcasts lately. Because I want to make sure that I'm asking you a diverse set of questions that you haven't had to deal with before.
Sure.
And then I'm trying to bring on people that are harder to get and that maybe I have access to because of my status as a writer for Jiu-Jitsu Times.
Yeah.
So because I write for Jiu-Jitsu Times, I've got people, in my Rolodex that, like, for example, last week I had Matt Heafy on the podcast, who sings and plays guitar for a band called Trivium.
Yeah, I saw you post that. And I know you've interviewed him before, right?
Yeah, I have. I mean, he's a super nice guy. And, I reached out to him, got in touch with him, did a Jiu-Jitsu Times feature article about him. Then we had him on, there was like a Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast that we did, and we had him on that. And then I figured that it would be nice to have him on this. And really, the one-on-one nature of this allowed me to really kind of get into the nitty-gritty of things that it just wasn't possible with a co-host.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, it just, for me, I've been blessed with being able to talk to so many really cool people. So now I'm going to use that to kind of give other people, if they want, the ability to talk to those people too through the comments. Nobody commented on this today, but sometimes, you know, we get a load of comments, and what I'll do is I'll bring the comments onto the screen and kind of let you talk to people that are interested in talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, sounds good, man. Well, I'll keep an eye on a few of the upcoming ones for sure.
For sure, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Josh, and have a great day and stay healthy.
You too, man. It's good to talk to you.